I will be reading from Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. That will be from the New King James Version, Matthew 4, 1 and 2. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, afterward he was hungry.
Thank you. I remember my first paid ministry position. I was about 18 years old. I had been doing youth ministry since I was about 16. I grew up at a congregation out here in the countryside, and so I started corralling the youth to go to this event or that, or singings and things like that. But then I was 18, and the difference was, the first time I was the guy there and I got tapped, they already knew me. The second time they did not know me, and so they needed to interview me, and so I was nervous about this interview. And so they hired me, and after an extensive interview, extensive to me anyway, stressful. And so I remember the first summer after I had been in college for 2 semesters, and then the first summer was really when the rubber was going to meet the road, and I had created this full-scale agenda of ministry. And I remember I showed it to my dad, and my dad said, well, if I were you, I would go over there on Wednesdays, and I'd go over there on Sundays. And when you go on Wednesdays, go a little bit early and spend some time there, and then when you go on Sundays, stay there for the afternoon. You can visit people then. And I just remember thinking, that is just exactly the opposite of what I have been, talking about doing, ministry 7 days a week. Now my dad was his advice was actually great. I just couldn't perceive it at the time. They were giving me about $100 a week, and I was commuting to Corinth, Mississippi, and I was barely going to break even, financially speaking, if I drove over there twice a week. Okay, you following me here? And he's also thinking, they want you to do a job. Go do the job that they want you to do. That's great if you want to do all this other stuff, but that's pro bono. They're not going to reimburse you so that you can do all of the ministry kicks that you want to get. And my dad also knew that money doesn't grow on trees, and so he says, well, do the very best you can within the resources that you have. I didn't get any of that, okay? So anyway, I threw myself into it, like 7 days a week. I'm going over there every day. I'm making calendars and events and just loving it. Well, 12 months later, about 18 months later, I'm married. And I'm traveling down to Corinth, and guess what changed in my life that hadn't changed before? Well, I'm not commuting from Florence anymore during the summer from my parents' house. I'm commuting from my house that I'm paying for, and then all of a sudden I had this huge awakening. Honey, we do not have enough money. And so I remember I was really nervous about it. I was so upset and stressed because I was going to have to go to them and see if they would give me a raise. I just had to. So we had this meeting, and I just laid out my case, and there was a couple of guys there who weren't all in favor of it, and then there was another couple that were in favor of it, and got through it all, and I was going to get the raise. I was just so thrilled. And they were going to bump me up to $200 a month, or $200 a week. $200 a week. Yeah, it felt like $200 a month. So $200 a week, and so that first check that came in, I remember it said $100 salary, $100 benevolence. I was just crushed. I was like, they see me as a benevolence project. Well, what's going on here? What's going on? I had a misunderstanding of the situation. You see? I thought that what I was doing was just the whole world depended upon me. The entire outcome of their kids depended upon me, etc., etc. Really, they needed somebody to come teach some classes, to do a few things with their kids, to corral them, and they could afford about $100 a month. That was kind of in their budget. So for them to go beyond that, really, I no longer fit the equation. You see? And it wasn't because they felt bad. They loved me. They loved me and my wife and thought well of us, but this was not within their budget. They knew what their resources were. So there's 2 things from this, and this is general comments about preparation for service. And then we're going to go specifically into one that I want to challenge you on, okay? Number one, I want to encourage you to understand yourselves as students here in preparation for service. I was so anxious to get a ministry job that I could not appreciate the season of life that I was in. You know, Scripture talks about seasons all the time, seasons of life. If you want to go snow ski, you need to do it in the right season, okay? You may want to snow ski in June, but you're not going snow skiing in June in Alabama. Okay, you may not be snow skiing at all in Alabama. So you've got to do things by the season. And if you notice in Jesus' life, he's basically in preparation up until when? About age 30. And there's not anything magical about age 30. What it is that you need to realize that you're in a season of life, and there's certain types of things that you need to be doing in certain seasons, okay? And it's not going to be up to you to do some of the things that you want to do when you're not in the right season. Everything's got to match up right, and you have to start paying attention to this. So even if you're involved in a ministry job now, and you're not let's say you're not over the age of 30, if we want to use that age, don't take yourself so seriously. Don't think that it all hinges upon you, because it does not. That does not mean that you're not taking it seriously. It just means don't take yourself too seriously and realize that there are a lot of other factors in play here. Okay? But in the same way, when you reach the point where you are in a ministry, you still don't have to take yourself that seriously. Because now at that point, with wisdom, you should be able to realize that you can start arranging different types of pieces so that you are not the essential piece that everything falls apart, in which you thought you were when you were younger. So we've got to start paying attention to the season. And the season that I want to look at has to do with the reading that we just read just a moment ago. Look at it with me, Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. In particular, the season of preparation for ministry. Matthew chapter 4. You know, the fascinating thing about this is when we read this passage, we see Jesus talking about being tempted by the devil, and he's going to be fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. One of the reasons I like reading the Gospels is because although they're stories telling us about the life of Jesus taking place around the year 30, we also know that the Gospels had a first audience that they were written to. So that when Matthew writes his Gospel, he actually has a community of faith or communities of faith in mind that he wants to read this so that they can see how they ought to be living their life too. Okay? So we have instructions on the church and how they should behave in the Gospel of Matthew. But in this case, what are we seeing instructions? Well, we know that those first churches, similar to churches today, were taking people who were responding to God, they're repenting of their sins, they're confessing in the name of God, and they're what? They're being baptized. Now, if you notice this real carefully, just before our passage, we see all of these same things with Jesus. You have John preaching his message. The people come to him, and they do what? You can interact with me. They're repenting and they're being baptized. Well, confession's not there, is it? Well, actually it is. Here's the interesting thing. When Jesus is baptized, Jesus doesn't say, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, does he? But who does say it? God says it. God shows up at the baptism and says, this is the part of what y'all are all doing that we know Jesus can't say it, but guess what? It was said then too. It was a public declaration and confession of who he was. Now, what's fascinating about this is that Jesus is baptized, and if we're trying to see what Christians ought to do with their walk with God after they're baptized, what needs to come next? You've just made the all-important decision to follow God, completely give your life to Him. The first thing that happens is not He hits the ground running, is it? The first thing that He does is He seriously prepares. And that's what you get in chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil, and when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterward a-hungered. And when the tempter came to him, he said, If thou be the Son of God, command that these stones be made bread. What's fascinating about this is that this is appropriate to the season. Just think about it. Jesus is about to launch into the greatest ministry of his life. He needs to prepare. Jesus is about to embark on a ministry that will lead to a tempting and a testing of his entire being. I'm talking about the crucifixion. I'm talking about everything that he knows is going to happen later on. And he, as a human being, is wanting to be prepared. See, he's speaking to the side that we should understand. He needs to be prepared. How does he simulate this? Fasting. Fasting 40 days and 40 nights. The interesting thing about fasting is that this is a form of preparation that is extremely difficult to do once the ministry has begun. Why? He would have no energy. He cannot walk 10 miles a day if he's fasting. He has to have the fuel in his body so that he can carry out his ministry. He can only do the preparation at that season. And what's fascinating about him fasting is that the temptations that come to him only come to him after he's fasted. You know, I was thinking about it. I'm involved with the Boy Scouts, and my son's involved in it, and so I'm trying to keep pace with him so that I can always be involved at the activities that he wants to go to. And so 2 weekends ago, we went through what is called an ordeal. And I thought, okay, an ordeal with the Boy Scouts can't be that much of an ordeal, you know. And so I said, well, what do you do? Well, you don't eat for a day, and they let you do manual labor, and you're not supposed to talk, you know. And I'm like, that's no big deal, that's fine. Because in fact, I was like, they even let you eat, you know. They just hold back what you eat. So I showed up at Camp Jackson or Camp Sequoia in the middle of the woods, you know. It's been raining, it's been gushing, you know. And so we're all standing there with the raincoats, and the ordeal was supposed to happen at like 10 o'clock at night. Oh, they're keeping us up late, you know, going to make it hard on us. Well, 2:30 in the morning, I'm laid out on this bench, still waiting to go through my initiation ceremony, and I am exhausted. It's 2:30, they finally get us up, we walk out into the middle of the woods, go through this ceremony, and then they let us lay down by 3 o'clock in the morning. 6:30, 3.5 hours later, they get us up. We've been laying on the ground with just a tarp. You know, at this point, I'm like, well, this is not fair. They didn't tell me they were going to deprive my sleep too. So then we get up, and then we shovel gravel into wheelbarrows for 8 hours. And all they give us to eat is like an egg, a slice of bread, and some water. And, you know, I'm like, this is exhausting. And I remember they told us what we were supposed to be thinking about throughout the day. Cheerful service. Cheerful service. I mean, you should have heard how cheerful my thoughts were all day, you know. You know, it's just like, well, I would have been cheerful if they would have let me sleep at, 8 hours like I thought I was going to get. You know, I can handle you see how I was wanting certain things about my own testing. And when I got done, I was like, that was an ordeal. And I felt like I had failed the test because I was not cheerful. And I was silent. I ate what they gave me, basically, cheerful service. Well, Jesus is getting tested in the Scriptures at that point. After everything's hit, now the test on whether or not he's actually going to follow God comes up. And what's valuable about this is that Jesus actually simulates life. A lot of times we probably underscore the value of preparation. And the thing about it is sometimes we say, well, this isn't real life. If you're complaining about your subjects and classes, I promise you will complain about your church members. If you don't embrace your test now and go, this is a great chance for me to serve, I promise you will not say that about the opportunities that you're given when you get into ministry. This is a preparation. And the way you respond to it and react to it is going to mirror how you will do it when the rubber meets the road. You see what I'm saying? You have bad study habits now, you will have bad ministry habits. You can't handle your diet now, you won't handle your diet then. When people approach you with difficult scriptural problems, if you fly off the handle, you will fly off the handle then too. When you give them the wrong scriptural answers because maybe you were too tired, you'll give them the wrong answers then as well. The beauty of this situation is, now catch this, you will make mistakes, okay? But you need to make as many of them as you can while you're in preparation, okay? The consequences are smaller. Because once you get all of these factors involved in it, the consequences become bigger and bigger and bigger, so that your shortcomings now don't become little shortcomings. They become huge failures later that destroy lots of people's lives. You see? So, when we see the preparation, we see Jesus going out and preparing Himself for a tough road. And the beauty of this time, and this is where it fits into what Travis was talking about yesterday, you get to reflect on how you're dealing with it now. Let's say that you've already been complaining about your test and your classes and stuff like that. Well, guess what? We're early in the semester. You can fix it. Isn't that awesome? Just change it. And this also applies not just for what's happening here, but this also applies to what's happening within your congregations that you're getting involved in as well. You can get involved in these congregations, and at the same time, stop thinking about that as reality, and this is not reality. Start thinking about that as the classroom that you're exploring and taking the information you're getting here and you're putting into that one, okay? And that way, you're beginning to see that your entire life is a preparation for ministry. But let's look at one more example here in Jesus' writings from chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. The fasting itself. I really want to encourage you to try out fasting as a preparation for ministry. Now, let me just encourage you, don't do it like midterm week, unless like you're really like I'm gung-ho and I can do this. So what I'm going to encourage you to do, and I'm actively going to solicit, not out of pride or egoism, I'm going to encourage us who want to fast to pick a day that we might can do some fasting, okay? And I want to talk about it at a very practical level. And I want to encourage you to realize that if Jesus fasts, it's an okay thing for you to do, okay? You don't have to have bad motives for it. I've never seen anybody who've read that passage where Jesus talks about almsgiving and praying and fasting. I've never heard anybody say we shouldn't pray because Jesus criticized bad praying. I've never heard anybody say we shouldn't give alms because Jesus criticized almsgiving. However, I do hear people say we shouldn't fast because Jesus criticized bad fasting. So let's go the other way with it. Fasting. Fasting can be very challenging. If you go 24 hours fasting, it will be challenging to you if you've never done it before. If you have medical conditions, for instance, you have low blood sugar, issues like that, you really need to talk to a doctor first, because I don't want anybody to get sick or doing serious irreparable damage. So you need to know your own body and what your blood sugar levels are like and things like that. And I think most of us know that in general. I know some people who have to have something to maintain their blood sugar levels, and so I've seen people who do juice fasts. They'll have no food, or they'll deprive themselves of certain things in order to be able to carry out a fast. But what will happen is during that first 24 hours, you're really just messing with your normal schedule. You're not actually doing a whole lot that will harm your body tremendously. It's really just, man, I usually eat breakfast at this time of day. This is really bothering me. I want to eat. And so you're just kind of messing with those types of things. But you will find yourself with a lower energy level. You'll be extremely tired. You'll probably want to sleep. You need to hydrate yourself. Drink a lot of water. You'll probably be irritable. You'll probably say things to people that you normally wouldn't say. You'll probably, and this is one of the bad things, you'll find yourself much more alert. And That is bad because you wish you could just kind of sleep through it and get through it, but you're not. You're going to be alert. By the third day of fasting, at this point, your body is beginning to quickly break those routines where when noon comes around, your body's not going to go, I'm hungry, it's time to eat. You know, that knee-jerk response. By day 3, your body's going to start saying, okay, I'm seeing a pattern, I will acknowledge that, and we will shift. The metabolism will shift. All of a sudden, your body's going to quit requiring you to need those 2,000 calories a day or 2,500 calories. Your body's going to start saying, okay, we'll cut back. We'll go down to 1,000 or 1,500 if that's the way it's going to be. But the interesting thing is you will at that point begin to realize that you're not hungry after about 3 days. And you'll start to adjust to a new pattern. Your energy level will be extremely low. You will be irritable still. You'll find it difficult to deal with some of the most simple functions of a normal day. Just for instance, if somebody asks you a question about whether or not you prefer this or that, you may not be able to answer them quickly because you're going to have a hard time thinking, and it's going to be challenging. What's fascinating, though, is you can, physiologically speaking, fast for 40 days. This is not an impossibility. The body, there's basically 3,500 calories for every pound of fat, and you can do the math if you want to, how many pounds that you have to burn over 40 days, okay? But the thing about this is you can't go on a serious long-term fast, for instance, in the middle of a semester. You physically can't handle all the responsibilities. You can't get yourself to class. After about 5 days, 6 days, you're going to think it is just Herculean if you were asked to get up from this chair and walk back to the back of this auditorium. And you will be mad at somebody for asking you to do that. Okay? And so all of the most simple day-to-day aspects of life become challenging. Your body's going to be detoxing like it's never detoxed before. Why? Your body is going to be vigorously searching for food and eating every single bit of the fat stores that it can. And when you start unleashing the fat storehouses of your body, you're also unleashing everything that has been perfectly preserved within them that don't necessarily make the blood system go so well, which affects your thinking, it affects your behavior, your energy level, all of those types of things. What am I advocating? I'm trying to just flesh out some ideas about fasting as a preparation step. My rationale is simple. If Jesus thought it was a good idea before he launched his ministry, it can't be that bad of an idea. You see? So, what I would like to encourage you to do is if this is something that is interesting to you, that you want it to be a part of your education, and I think it should be. The last time I spoke, I said traveling and doing mission work should be part of your education. You should just go ahead and say, I'm going to do this, because you need to do that in preparation for ministry. I'm also going to advocate fasting as well. You need to spend some time in fasting. At a bare minimum, pick one day of the week and skip a lunch or skip a breakfast and just see the effect it has on you. But in particular, ask yourself, how is this impacting my connection to God, my faithfulness to God, my trust in God? You see? Make it into a spiritual activity. And I think it's going to bless you. You know, as we wrap this up, what I would like to encourage you to do is just come talk to me if this is something you're interested in doing and you'd like to do it in community. We could talk about it. I would love for you to be able to try it out and talk to others about it as well, okay, and get their feedback. We're not advocating this because you want to be prideful, okay? We're advocating this because this is an important component that you could add to your training. In the same way you talk about, you know, Dr. Gallagher's test and how hard it was, why don't you talk about some of these aspects too? Yeah, that was really tough, fasting. I didn't do so well with this aspect or that. And I think it could be a real blessing to you in many ways. So, in conclusion, when you look at these passages of Jesus, I encourage you to look at them closely, to realize that you are preparing for ministry like he was, and that you can follow these things, you can do these things. and I think it'll be a real blessing to you.